Hey guys, I am back. It has been a little while, but anyone who's subscribed to my channel for any number of time, honestly, should not be surprised. Hopefully you guys love my delightfully flighty video upload schedule. So anyone who follows me on Twitter or Instagram, or who just read the title of this video, should know what I'm about to tell you all, but I moved to London about 2 months ago. So I am here for school, so I'll be here for the next year while I work on getting my MA in creative writing. Okay, that's it. That's the video. No, you guys should also know that I like talking, so I'm about to give you a whole deep dive into the background, why England, how things are going, also my plans for the channel. I'm also requesting if anyone is a video editor or knows any video editors. I do think that if I rather than just editing these videos myself, if I can just have a little bit of help, it will feel like less work. I can just record my video and hopefully outsource it. So let's go back to the beginning. This decision was both spontaneous and not. So if we want to go all the way back, it all started with my Anglophilia as a kid. My aunt, I have an aunt who lives in England, and as a kid, I was always so fascinated by her accent, and I loved imitating it, and I do think that's what led me, well, I feel like it tied in with just my enjoyment of imitating other accents and voices and just, you know, just playing with my voice. And so I just always loved the idea of England. I always loved the idea of visiting, and I did have the opportunity to visit in 2018 with one of my best friends. And though my aunt lived in Cambridge, we did take a day trip to London, and I thought it was awesome, and I was like, I have to study abroad here. Study abroad was something that I had also always wanted to do from when I started college. Initially, I was learning Spanish, so I decided it would probably be Spain or England. As I said, England was always a forerunner. But alas, my GPA didn't really allow for that. Initially, study abroad wasn't something I was thinking about. I just wanted to get through my core requirements. And any longtime followers will know the struggles I had with my undergrad school and the accessibility office, and it definitely started to take a toll on my mental health a little bit. At some point I didn't know when I would graduate, if I would graduate, and it was just a whole big kerfuffle, and so my GPA definitely started plummeting. At some point I no longer had the GPA to qualify for the study abroad applications. And then COVID happened and no one was traveling anywhere. Then I graduated and that was it. I spent 2021 looking for jobs. I remember at some point one of my friends mentioned looking into international master's programs, and I was like, oh, that sounds awesome. And then the beginning of this year, I don't know when I started thinking about it per se, but I just started Googling how can I travel without money? And there was a lot of volunteer opportunities. And actually in high school, I used to want to join the Peace Corps, but I no longer have aspirations. I still would love to help the world where I can, but I don't know if volunteering for just, depending on the organization, if that's still the right way to go for me. So yeah, I saw a lot of volunteering things. While in my unsuccessful job hunt, I started looking into maybe if I could work for an international company, or I learned about the digital nomad life, if I could find a job that would allow me to work solely online, and maybe I could travel. At some point, I did start seeing a few articles that talked about getting a degree abroad, but I was like, okay, this is great, but what about the part where I don't have money? How would I pay for that? And I learned that the US government has connections with their student loan programs with schools, several schools abroad. And so I started lightly researching. I started looking into top creative writing schools in England. I think there were a few things that were just top creative writing schools in Europe, but my focus was geared more toward England. Why England? So like I said before, I enjoyed when I visited, and while I did look at editorial work in Toronto, I for some reason didn't even think about Canada for school. One of my main thoughts was that even though England, of course, like I already mentioned, was one of the places I had always wanted to possibly study in, live in, I was also thinking about COVID and my mental health, and I wanted to be in England for family. No matter where I was, I'd be a few hours away from my aunt. I also looked into Paris because it was close enough to England that I would feel comfortable should there be any shutdowns. I could get to my aunt at the very least if I couldn't get back home. And it would also allow me to, so the plan was to take courses in English, but then I could immerse myself in the culture and work on my language skills. So as I said, it was sort of just like light researching, tentatively looking into things, reading a few people's like study abroad experiences, their degree abroad experiences. And then it just sort of happened, me applying. I started researching requirements, wondering if my trash GPA would be accepted anywhere. Then somehow I created a spreadsheet so that I could document all of my research, and it just started moving. I think that the idea also of studying abroad, like or looking into an international master's program, was sort of maybe subconsciously like percolating in my brain, because as I mentioned, one of my friends had also suggested it, and then I saw it in the articles, but then I kept looking at jobs, and it was just there until I started tentatively researching and looking into how that might actually be possible. The other thing I do want to add is I actually had no plans of going to graduate school, or not anytime soon. After my experience at Hunter and the accessibility office, I was just like, I need a break from education. But my mindset was sort of like, go big or go home. And if I was going to continue my education, I just wanted to make a big change. I didn't want to continue like studying and being at home, because it would just sort of be the same things that I had been doing the past several years. So I already had a loose sense of the accessibility lawsuits out there, but I started an internship with this organization, UsableNet, around the time I started this research, and just started learning more and more about how many like higher ed lawsuits there are with regard to not supporting blind and visually impaired students. And so that was another reason why I was just like, I want to go somewhere else where hopefully the accessibility experience will be better, but if it's not, it'll also just be a new experience overall. I was surprised by how late the deadlines were. Things were in mid-March, July, it was just rolling. There was no actual end date. You could just apply and hope for the best. I also started reviewing the visa process and what that might entail, and I can make a video on that if anyone's interested. One of the major concerns for me when it came to potentially applying to these schools were my academic references. I was a year out of school. The most recent creative writing professor I had was in 2020. I had not kept up with any of them, and I knew that I could potentially use a different professor, or just at the very least use an English professor, but I thought, one, since my undergrad degree is in creative writing, it would look better to have at least one creative writing professor. And I just was like, I couldn't leave that idea alone. I was like, I'll reach out to the rest if no one gets back to me, but I have to have a creative writing professor. While I was contemplating that and trying to figure out the odds of any of my professors responding to me, maybe remembering me, I also started working on my portfolio, which was interesting, sort of like deciding which stories I thought was the strongest and which would like best get my voice across, as well as the themes and ideas that I'd like to write about that I talked about in my personal statement, which I also had to write. That was not as hard as I thought it would be. I think I had all of the ideas. It was sort of just compiling it. But yeah, it ended up not being terrible. And I mean, I got into a couple of schools, so I guess it was good enough. So when it came to the portfolio, I reached out to one of my creative writing professors who I remained loosely in contact with, I guess. So I guess it wasn't accurate to say that I wasn't in contact with anyone, but I still hadn't talked to him in a few years. And I asked if he would look over my portfolio. I didn't think for some reason about asking him for a reference, not initially, but I reached out to all 4 of the creative writing professors I had. 2 never responded. 1 didn't have time because of an ongoing family emergency. And then I finally asked the one reviewing my portfolio who said yes, which was great. And a lot of the schools allowed me to have just one reference, or it had to be at least one academic, and I could have job references, and I had tons of those, so I wasn't concerned about that. But I was definitely like, I needed to have a creative writing person, and I got it. So that was awesome. So by the first week of May, I had sent in 4 applications, and now it was just the waiting game. I hadn't told too many people in my life because I was just a little superstitious. I didn't think any of my friends would harbor any like ill will, but I didn't want this to be the time to test it. But I was also thinking about the fact that should I not get into any of the schools, I didn't want everyone to be reaching out to me in a few months like, hey, what's going on with school? And I'm like, I didn't get into any of them, and I don't want to keep like reliving it. And so I tried to keep it as close to the vest as possible. So I heard back from 3 of my 4 schools in a relatively timely manner. The number one was taking forever, and I was getting more and more anxious as I read Reddit posts about the UK visas being delayed because of the war with Ukraine. The UK was prioritizing Ukrainian visas, and I was just like, okay, like I need that first choice to get back to me. I was rejected from one school, accepted into the other two, but the problem was that, so my number one choice was the University of Nottingham, which I really was excited about their program, though not necessarily the city. I don't know offhand the population of Nottingham, but I was like, this is a city? This sounds like a neighborhood in Brooklyn. But I also thought for like my first experience away, my first experience abroad, it would actually probably be better to go somewhere smaller, like a little bit more intimate, not as crazy to get accustomed to. The second choice, which was a school in London, I was excited about for London. The school sounded interesting enough, but there was something in the electives at Uni Nottingham that I was just like, man, I really want to go here. I think one of them was like a class on, was it romance novels in the Middle Ages or something like that? I don't recall exactly, but I remember being super fascinated by it. In the end, my number one choice did not get back to me before the deadline for school 2, so I ended up accepting school 2. And honestly, as time went on, I started getting more and more excited as they reached out to me and started talking about some of the events that they offer. And I was like, also, I'm gonna be in London. Like, I liked the idea of being in a smaller city, but I'm a city kid. I thought, like, even though the adjustment might be a little bit hard, going from one big city to the other won't be so bad. Like, it won't be the same experience as if I were like from a small town and getting accustomed to it. The main thing would just be like adjusting in terms of mobility orientation and how I travel. So after all that, next came the visa applications and anxiously waiting to see if they would take the 3 weeks stated on the website, or if there would be any delays. And so this left me in a weird in-between period where I was planning where I could, but also trying not to get too excited or too invested. My mindset was kind of neutral. Everyone was like, of course you'll get it, of course you'll get in. And I was just like, listen, there's no reason for me not to be approved, but I don't want to assume one way or the other. I don't want to assume that I've got it and then be disappointed when I don't. And I didn't want to do the thing where I tell myself, oh no, you definitely, or you won't get it, like don't even get excited. So that I could be extra excited when I do get it, because I was like, listen, I don't want the universe to take me to heart now and, I don't actually get approved. So we bought plane tickets we kind of chose a time at random. I knew when the semester would start. I also was trying to get in as much time as possible so my sister could help me navigate, could help me learn as much of the area as possible, but also, the longer the trip, the more money we would have to spend in whether it was a hotel or Airbnb, but like the nights that we would have to spend and pay for. So we sort of just chose a date and hoped for the best. During this time, I did also apply for housing, but I still didn't initially know when I'd be able to move in. And then they told me that I couldn't move in any earlier than a certain date. And so it was just, just trying to there were so many moving parts and I just had to work with it. So it's crazy. I always tell people like I'm organized, but not at the same time. I made tons of lists about things that I would need to do before I get to London, things I need to do immediately once I got to London. And people, would ask about what's your plan for once I'm actually there, like, spending the year if I made it. And I'm just like, I have no idea. I'm open to that changing. But it was sort of like I was planning everything that was in my control and I was just letting go what wasn't. So anyway, I was finally approved on August 25th and I had 2 weeks to just make all of my tentative plans into reality. It was a whirlwind of like buying new things, the things that I thought I would need, like waterproof shoes, for example, but also saying goodbye to as many people as I could. My family had a surprise going away party for me, which was really great. And it was a lot because as I was waiting for the visa, I started telling more and more people, but there were still people I needed to let know after I was approved. And yeah, it was a lot going on. And then since we had time, like we would be there a week before I could move in. I wasn't allowed to move in any earlier. We started looking into places that we could travel to, we being my sister, brother-in-law, and I. And so we ended up taking a day trip to France, which I do plan on making a video on later in a language journey update. So a little bit after arriving, I actually found out the day that I thought was the beginning of the semester was actually the beginning of welcome week, which is another annoying tidbit because we could have left maybe a week later and then my sister could have helped me more getting a feel for the campus, but we made it work. We had our day trip to France. We did some touristy things, we bought extra stuff that I might need for my room, and once I got in contact with them, the accessibility office here was actually pretty great. They gave me a lot more hope than my previous accessibility office. They just seemed more competent. But one of the important things, like the important parts of this story, is that they found me an orientation specialist. So it was a former student who helped me learn how to navigate the campus. And so while I'm navigating the campus, getting sort of back into the feel of being in school after being out of school for a year, the next hurdles I faced were creating a bank account, which I do plan on making a video about, and getting orientation assistance for off campus. The crossings here are weird, but that's also another upcoming video that I have planned for you guys, talking about the accessibility differences between London and New York. So now it's wild to think I'm making this video on November 8th, and whenever I upload it, hopefully this coming weekend, I'll have been here for just over 2 months. We got to the UK on September 9th, and I didn't move into my residence hall until the 16th, so it won't be 2 months having lived in this location, but it will have been 2 months that I have been living in London, and it's so interesting. It's so interesting being the foreigner now. Like, most people hear my accent and they just, like, they might ask where I'm from, but there was a few times when I've actually gotten like, hey, I heard you have an accent, where are you from? And it was so strange to me. Or thinking about like little differences in like dialect differences, things that I would recognize when I hear but actually have to think about using. For example, saying prawns instead of shrimp. I actually had an awkward encounter in a grocery store because of that. The person was sort of being very brusque, very abrupt, and new place, new setting, and I was feeling a little overwhelmed. Like, he wasn't saying hurry up, but his demeanor kind of was. It was just like, anything else, like moving fast, and I was just like, yeah, just shrimp. And he's like, shrimp? And I'm like, yeah, shrimp. And he's like, oh, you mean prawns? And I was just like, okay, yeah, you knew what I meant. All of that, just like the little dialectual differences, my sister leaving me, all of that, like, initially made me really want to go home in the beginning. The day before, the night before, and the day of my sister leaving was just very somber, and I definitely struggled initially, and I was torn because I was like, if I know some of it is just, it's new, but if I really don't like it here, I would feel like it's such a waste, like the money I paid for the visa, the money that we spent on the plane tickets here, all the time that we spent in the hotel. And my sister was like, listen, give it a few months, see how you feel. You had the experience, even if you ultimately come back home, like, it won't necessarily have been a waste because you tried. And then she kept giving me saying this inspirational crap, like, this is always your dream and you did it, like no one else helped you, like you did it all on your own, and yada yada yada, whatever. I was saying that, but it definitely did help, but it took a little while. I was mostly campus bound. Like, I'm really happy to be living on campus because I think it made it a little bit easier to, whenever I was ready to step outside, but I could just stay on campus as needed and just head to class and come back and just have Uber deliver everything that I need. I mentioned having an aunt who lives here. She doesn't live in London, but my brother-in-law's aunt and grandmother actually live here. And my aunt-in-law has just been such an awesome support for me in terms of just helping me, like running around with me. We've gone to a few lunches. I've also hung out a few times with classmates, and I can talk about sort of getting back into the swing of academics and making friends, as an adult, as an expat. But yeah, so my initial thoughts were just kind of like, this campus is stupid, London is stupid, all of it is stupid. But I actually, now that I know the campus better, I'm like, okay, this place isn't too bad. There was one day when I was walking from class or the campus restaurant or something, and I walked successfully to my residence hall. I didn't overshoot it, I didn't undershoot it. I just got there. And honestly, it's some weeks in, and sometimes I'll still walk past it, or like, start looking for the door too soon. But it was just this perfect moment, and I was like, okay, this place isn't so bad. London, we're still in the get to know you phase of our relationships. This place isn't quite so stupid anymore, as I'm figuring out more things about the traffic lights and stuff like that. I've shifted from this place is stupid to neutral. And the crazy part is, before leaving, I had all these contingency plans for how I might be able to stay if I did like it here, like the various visa things, possible routes to citizenship. And right now, I'm just open to seeing how things settle for me. So for upcoming videos, I've already tossed some of my ideas out there, but I plan on making a video about accessibility here, one about my banking experience, more book reviews, my language learning journey, my time in school, maybe just talking about like vacations as I take them and all of that stuff. But one of the things I do realize that sometimes my hurdle for creating these videos is taking the time to sit down and edit them. So I'm hoping that if any of my lovely subscribers, all 315 of you, hi to the new subscribers, by the way. I think I've got maybe 2 or 3 since my last upload. If anyone is a video editor or knows any video editors, I don't really know how to go about looking for a good editor. So that's something I'm doing a little bit of research into. But I do feel like if I can just sit down, record the video, and then outsource it to someone to edit, that definitely takes some of the extra work for me out of it. And it's just kind of like this fun thing that I'm doing, and it doesn't feel like work taking out time to sit and edit. All right, guys, that is all from me. Hope you enjoyed this video. I definitely plan on having more coming your way, and I have some backlogged things that I just need to edit. So yeah, till next time.